name's Miles Brown. I'm the Senior Cloud and DevOps Advisor at ExitCertified. ExitCertified is a training company that provides technical training from a lot of different vendors. Cloud vendors like AWS and Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, Oracle Cloud. But we also have a lot of cloud-related training, different kinds of workloads that people run in the cloud, especially things like containers and Kubernetes. And so I have with me Mike Stapleton. Maybe Mike, you could talk a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, I'm an instructor for ExitCertified. I've been teaching since 1999. Been working in IT industry since before then. I kind of teach system administration, development throughout the years. Currently, I'm kind of focusing on Kubernetes and cloud services and identity and access management, and kind of got my fingers in a little bit of everything.
Excellent. Well, Kubernetes is what I want to talk about a little bit today. And we'll do it sort of as an interview. I'll ask you a few questions. Maybe you could tell me some things. I know a little bit about containers and Kubernetes, but I think people would want to know, some of the things that we see, because we teach a lot of different vendors. We're able to kind of give maybe a vendor agnostic view of things. Because we are partnered with everybody, we teach their authorized training, but we also can see through the cracks between the vendors. So I wanted to start with just talking about containers and Kubernetes. These days there's such a push that you see in enterprise IT that, hey, this is the way to go. Everything's going to be Kubernetes down the road. And I get the sense that that's not always the case. I've talked to some customers who started down this road and then came back and said, we don't need that complexity. We just have a simple web app that doesn't scale like crazy, isn't very complex. So maybe you could talk about, where Kubernetes and containers in general is appropriate and when maybe it isn't.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how it's like the monolith. It's when you have a conversation, right? They start off with the monolith, and it's like this awful thing that you could never do. And this is technology, and it depends on your requirements, right? So the thing about Kubernetes is it helps solve networking, storage, service discovery, scheduling problems of complex applications. That usually means distributed applications across many, many servers. If that's not what you're doing, Kubernetes itself is extremely complex. So you're going to be bringing on this whole infrastructure knowledge and everything and not really getting any benefit of it. Right? Yeah. On the other hand, if you have a whole just complex application and you want it to be web scales, you're going to have all kinds of networking problems you need to solve. And you're going to have to solve them one way or another with Kubernetes or not. And it's a lot easier with Kubernetes, but it doesn't make it easy. Yeah, it's a complex thing. I just want to add one little thing here. It's when I used to teach enterprise Java, you remember, for Sun Microsystems, they had in their training a nice little thing. They said enterprise Java doesn't make enterprise development easy. It just makes it tractable, right? Because it would be, without enterprise Java, building some of those apps would have been near impossible. Yeah. Right? So that's kind of the same thing we're sitting here with Kubernetes. It's an awesome tool, but only if you need it.
Yeah. So that complexity that it does bring, I'm familiar with the cloud vendors, and each of them seems to have a service to help with that complexity of Kubernetes. Mm-hmm. So, for example, EKS in AWS. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about some of the things that the cloud vendor can do for you with Kubernetes, and why we would love that, or maybe why we would avoid it.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's two parts really when you're dealing with Kubernetes. There's the Kubernetes cluster and Kubernetes software, and it is a thing itself that you have to build and maintain. And then once you have Kubernetes, then you have to deploy your application and services and everything in it. Both can be fairly complex. Probably deploying your app in it is the most complex part in reality. But at least with a cloud vendor, you outsource the system administration of the cluster itself. You're not responsible for doing the backups of all of the Kubernetes data, not your data. You still have you're still responsible for your data, but at least the configuration and everything, the cluster, that's taken care of the vendor. They can also make it easy to scale, and they'll also integrate it with their own services for logging purposes and things like that. That if you were to install Kubernetes raw yourself, it doesn't. You're going to have to figure out your own logging. You're going to have to figure out your own, integration with identity and access management solutions. You're going to have to, Kubernetes doesn't have a whole lot of opinions about anything. So you got to figure all that. So when you go to a vendor,
it
you
sounds
get
like
the cluster with a couple of clicks, and then you just go and deploy your application on it. Like that's big deal. Like you want to go there if you can.
that
Sure.
sounds like a bit of a double-edged sword. They're going to make your life easier, but they're also going to tie you very much to that cloud vendor.
Well, that's exactly it, right? That's everything. There's a cost benefit analysis kind of thing you got to do. With the cloud vendor, it's plug and play. You get to go, ooh, but then you're also handcuffed. I don't know about you, but sometimes I just want to go to the raw logs. I was working recently on a cluster on Google, and I was just I wanted to look at some of the Kubernetes logs, and I was just fighting with Google's logging system, trying to get basic logs I would have found in 2 minutes. It's nice that it's integrated with their logging, but it's bad it's integrated with their logging.
Yeah, well, you have to understand how
you lose some control, and
and I imagine if you are in a multi-cloud situation or a hybrid where you have some Kubernetes workloads running on-prem in your own clusters and some running in the cloud, having to manage the two different types of clusters different ways probably just gets in the way at some point.
You always try and find the simplest solution for sure. Consistency. That was the whole point of containers. I always find it interesting when people that talk about containers, like, oh, I can pack more stuff into a server. No, it decouples your development environment from your runtime environment from prod. Right. In the past, the developers would choose Ubuntu. Well, now I need a Ubuntu server. And if other people were CentOS. And so in ops, you'd have all these different OSs and everything. Containerization allowed you to standardize. So now you just have a whole bunch of servers saying so much easier to automate and manage. Yeah. So yeah, that's a true thing at any point. So yeah, having consistency in your cluster technology. Yeah. For sure.
So around that, I definitely see some of our clients who want to be, either hybrid or multi-cloud with their container applications, but they do want some help. So they turn to a product like OpenShift. We are partnered with Red Hat. We do training on Red Hat OpenShift. So what does that bring to the table? Because I know that is built around Kubernetes.
Well, it's built on top of, and there's a number of them out there. The thing about Kubernetes, we often say it's a platform, but not really. I really find it to be more of a framework, because you start off with a Kubernetes cluster, and if you're doing it raw, like from the base, then it doesn't even have a default logging. It doesn't have a default way networking working. It doesn't have any integration with identity access management. It doesn't have any CI/CD pipelines, any of these kind of things. It has no default way of doing anything. So you have to do it yourself, which is the good and the bad. Right? If you know exactly what you want, you've got the expertise, you can turn Kubernetes into exactly what you need. On the other hand, if you don't, you may not have that much expertise, or you just want something I just want some logging and I just want some integration with identity access management. Well, that's where these other things that are built on top, you get a layer on top of Kubernetes, you get some opinions added to it. And so when you use like OpenShift, it has opinions about how you should do things, how your development team should work, how you do CI/CD pipeline, how security works. Kubernetes out of the box is not secure. You got to do work to make sure, and there's a whole lot of if, ands, or buts there. So if you just run Kubernetes, you're responsible for that. When you use OpenShift, they have opinions on security, which are good opinions, and you don't have to worry about it as long as you agree with their opinions.
Yeah. But I guess
have to agree with their opinions.
Again, there's a bunch of trade-offs there, because there's going to be some extra cost, but also if you're not happy with those opinions.
Well, we've all worked with people who we kind of really get along with. Let's say there's that one side you share opinions, like you almost don't even have to talk to each other. So like if Redshift works the way you think, OpenShift, sorry, works the way you think it should, yeah, it's too easy, you know. But on the other hand, we've all worked with those coworkers where you don't quite share, right? And then it causes conflict because you want to do it different, they want to do it a certain way. And yeah, the more you need to do something a little different, different to differentiate yourself, the harder, and yeah, it gets in the way. It becomes an obstacle. So yeah, it's give and take.
You mentioned that OpenShift's just one of these sorts of platforms on top of Kubernetes. Do you have any other examples? Like, is Rancher one of those? I've heard a little bit about Rancher.
Yeah, it's a good example.
Yeah, because I think we've had some customers doing some work for, say, the Department of Defense or something like that, and they had very specific security, requirements, and so they were able to make those work in Rancher versus maybe they couldn't do it with EKS in their AWS environment.
Well, that's actually a good point security wise, right? You have to have something that's certified. And if you just do your own thing to lock it down, they're like, nah, that's not, that hasn't been certified. So yeah, having a layer on top of it that's been pre-approved. Yeah, that's actually a really good point.
Okay. All right. Well, then I think that's probably all I had questions for you today. I just wanted to kind of get a better feel of when to use Kubernetes and maybe some of the different choices that you have when you do that.
Yeah.
And
complex distributed applications where you need something to help you with your storage, networking, keep it up and running, integration with DevOps and everything. And you'd really like to craft it to be just exactly what you need. Kubernetes. Also, it acts as a platform in a sense too, because if you develop your software to work in Kubernetes, anywhere you got Kubernetes cluster, you can run your app. So you're not tied to a vendor necessarily. You probably will be in other ways, but at least from that point, you'd be able to move your application need be to another vendor or something. So that's an attractive thing as well.
Right. All right. Well, thanks a lot for your time today, Mike. And I hope to make it into one of your classes sometime soon.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. It was a real pleasure. Take care.